In the quiet town of Oak Ridge, Vermont, where mornings are predictable, something happened one October Tuesday that would change everything. Roger Thompson, a bus driver with over 15 years of service, thought he was simply starting another typical day, picking up kids and driving them to school along the familiar route. But this day was different. As he rounded the corner near Oak Ridge Elementary, two police dogs appeared in the road. Muscular, trained, and unrelenting. They didn't budge, no matter how much Roger honked or tried to coax them away. Something about their behavior was strange, almost protective. Little did Roger know these two dogs, Ajax and Scout, weren't just standing in the way for no reason. They were blocking a potential disaster. When Roger stepped off the bus to investigate, he couldn't have imagined the gravity of the situation. Underneath the bus, something had been planted, something so dangerous it could have cost lives, if not for the extraordinary actions of these two K9s. Stay tuned to find out how these incredible dogs, against all odds, saved the day, and how a community came together to uncover a hidden danger that had been under their noses for months. This is the story of heroes who don't wear capes but make the ultimate difference when it matters most. Welcome to Acts of Kindness Stories. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, so you never miss the extraordinary real-life tales that can inspire and uplift us all. Roger Thompson was no stranger to routine. For 15 years, he had driven the same yellow school bus along the same roads, picking up children and delivering them safely to Oak Ridge Elementary. At 58, with silver streaks in his hair and a smile that showed the years of familiar faces and routes, he had perfected the rhythm of each school day. But that Tuesday in early October, nothing could prepare him for what he would experience. As usual, he woke up to the sharp chime of his alarm at 5:30 a.m., followed by his ritualistic cup of coffee and a muffin his wife Meredith had baked the night before. A glance at the weather forecast showed a perfect autumn day, with crisp air and clear skies, a typical start to a fall morning. By 6:45 a.m., Roger was behind the wheel of his bus, number 17, heading toward his first stop on Maple Street. There he'd pick up the Anderson twins, Emma and Ethan, always punctual and eager to chat. After the twins, it was off to the Sullivan house, where Zach always needed a reminder to hurry up, then the Carter triplets, who insisted on sitting in the same seats every day. It was a peaceful, repetitive rhythm, one Roger had come to know well. At 7:15 a.m., bus number 17 was packed with 23 kids, all preparing for another day of school. Roger had learned their personalities over the years, the quiet bookworms, the daydreamers, the overachievers, and kept an eye on them as they settled in, preparing for tests or finishing homework. He felt a deep sense of responsibility, not just as a driver, but as a protector for these children. The final stop before the school was always at the Mason family's farmhouse. Their daughter, Sophie, was always the last to board. Unlike the other children, Sophie was wide awake and ready to engage in conversation. That morning, she told Roger about her latest science project, a solar system made out of styrofoam balls. She even mentioned that Jupiter had 79 moons, which Roger didn't know, but he smiled and nodded, glad to be part of their lives day after day. With all the kids safely aboard, Roger began the final stretch of his route. It was the same familiar path, passing the Oak Ridge Library, the old diner, and the local town hall where his wife worked. But something was about to interrupt his usual flow. As he approached the last curve before the school, something unusual happened. Two police dogs appeared, standing squarely in the middle of the road. Roger instinctively slammed on the brakes. The bus lurched forward, sending a ripple through the children's morning chatter. The dogs, tall, strong, and purposeful, were clearly not out for a walk. They wore official K9 vests, badges gleaming on their sides, and stared intently at the bus. Their posture wasn't one of confusion. They were deliberate. "What's going on?" asked Zach Sullivan, leaning forward in his seat. "Just some dogs in the road," Roger replied, trying to calm the situation. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The dogs didn't move. Instead, one of them, a Belgian Malinois with a tan coat and a black mask, stepped closer to the bus, positioning itself directly in front of the bumper. The second dog, larger and darker, sat down next to it, both still watching Roger. Sophie, who had moved to the front of the bus to see better, noticed the situation. "Those are police dogs," she said. "My mom says they're smarter than most people." Roger nodded, puzzled. These weren't just stray dogs. There was purpose in their actions. Something didn't feel right. The children's curiosity grew, and murmurs spread through the bus. Roger decided to step off and investigate. "Everyone stay seated," he called out, as he opened the folding door and cautiously made his way toward the dogs. His palm outstretched in a calming gesture. He tried to approach, but the tan dog let out a low growl. It wasn't a threatening growl, but a clear warning to keep his distance. Roger took a step back, not wanting to provoke the animals. They weren't aggressive. They were focused. One of the dogs, the darker one, barked sharply, not at Roger, but at something beneath the bus. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. Something about their behavior seemed protective, almost like they were guarding the bus from an unseen danger. As he circled the bus, trying to figure out what could have the dogs so on edge, Roger noticed nothing unusual on the exterior, just the familiar yellow paint, dusted from the country roads. Still, the dogs remained unwavering, eyes locked on the underside of the bus, as if they were protecting it from something. Inside, the children were no longer ignoring the scene. They pressed their faces to the windows, their breath fogging the glass, watching intently. Emma Anderson, wide-eyed, asked, "Are those really police dogs?" Roger glanced back at the kids, trying to keep them calm. "Yeah, they look like the ones Officer Wilson brought for career day," Zach Sullivan commented, but there was no time to focus on trivia. Something was off. "I'm going to check it out," Roger muttered to himself. But before he could move forward again, Sophie spoke up. "Mr. Thompson, my mom's on the way," she said, pulling out her phone. "She says don't move the bus." Roger returned to the bus, uneasy. He could feel the growing tension as the children sensed something was wrong. He did his best to reassure them, but the uncertainty hung in the air. Minutes later, Principal Catherine Mason arrived, her expression one of concern as she approached the dogs cautiously. She asked Roger what had happened. Roger explained the situation, pointing at the K9s, which remained as vigilant as ever. "They were here last week for a demonstration with their handlers," Catherine remarked. "I recognize them. This isn't normal." She called Sheriff Jenkins, who promised to send units right away. In no time, 2 police cruisers arrived, sirens wailing, and more officers gathered around. Officer Ben Wilson, the K9 handler, stepped out of one of the cruisers. When he saw Ajax and Scout, the dogs seemed to acknowledge him, their behavior slightly shifting. They weren't as agitated, but they still didn't leave their positions. "They're not supposed to be here today," Officer Wilson said, his brow furrowed. "Something's wrong." As the officers began to investigate, Roger's unease grew. Sheriff Jenkins, who had just arrived, asked if Roger had noticed anything unusual about the bus. Roger shook his head. He had performed his usual inspection that morning, checking tires, brakes, and the emergency exits. Sheriff Jenkins and Officer Wilson crouched down, examining the underside of the bus. It was then that the realization began to hit. These dogs were alerting to something beneath the bus, something that didn't belong. "It's not aggression. They're in protection mode," Officer Wilson said. But Roger's heart sank. What was going on? What were these dogs so intent on? Soon more parents arrived, concerned and curious. Some of them began calling their children as news spread. With the sheriff's help, Roger began evacuating the kids in an orderly fashion, ushering them off the bus and away from the growing scene. But it wasn't just a routine evacuation. Sheriff Jenkins had called in the County K9 unit and the State Police Bomb Squad for a reason. The situation was escalating quickly, and Roger couldn't help but feel like he was in the middle of something much bigger than a simple traffic delay. Something dangerous was lurking, and it was tied to his bus. In the meantime, the bomb squad began their inspection of the device. Roger and the parents watched in silence, the tension thick in the air. The clock was ticking, but the dogs, Ajax and Scout, remained calm and alert, their presence a silent reminder of the stakes at hand. When the bomb squad's findings were revealed, it was as Roger had feared. A device had been placed under the bus, near the fuel tank. It appeared to be a sophisticated setup, one that could have been triggered remotely at any time. But the bomb squad soon confirmed something else. The device contained no real explosives, just enough to look dangerous, a calculated ruse designed to cause panic. It was then that the story took a turn. Officer Wilson revealed that the dogs had helped avert a catastrophe, and what was even more shocking was the identity of those behind it. Taylor and Harold Reynolds, a father and son duo who had spent months trying to alert authorities to structural issues with the school buses, issues that had been dismissed and ignored. The bomb scare was never intended to harm anyone. It was a desperate attempt to force the authorities to listen. The device had been planted to draw attention to the safety flaws in the bus fleet, which could have resulted in a catastrophic failure at any moment. The Reynolds men, though in legal trouble for their methods, had risked everything to prevent disaster. Their actions, though extreme, saved lives that day. And then there were the dogs, Ajax and Scout. Their instincts, their courage, and their unwavering dedication to protect those on the bus were the true heroes of the day. Without them, who knows what might have happened. As the community gathered in the high school gymnasium weeks later to celebrate the heroes of Oak Ridge, Roger Thompson couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. He had driven bus number 17 for 15 years, never imagining that a routine day would turn into a life-altering moment. What had started as a normal morning had spiraled into a crisis, one that, thankfully, was averted thanks to the extraordinary actions of two K9s, Ajax and Scout, and the courageous actions of Harold and Taylor Reynolds. The real heroes that day weren't just the police dogs who stopped a potential disaster with nothing but their instincts. They were the ones who never expected recognition for their actions but did what was necessary to protect others. Ajax and Scout, alongside Harold and Taylor, proved that sometimes the most unlikely heroes step forward when they're needed most. Their story reminded everyone that sometimes the biggest dangers are the ones we don't see until it's almost too late. The ceremony was a humbling experience for Roger, as the applause filled the room. But in the end, it wasn't about the plaques or the recognition. It was about the lessons they had learned as a community. To never ignore safety concerns, to always listen to those who risk everything to do what's right, and to never underestimate the power of instinct. As Roger reflected on the events that had unfolded, he realized how fragile life could be. One moment, everything is routine, and the next, you're faced with a situation where everything you thought was safe could have been dangerous. But in Oak Ridge, the community came together, and they made sure that no one would take safety for granted again. They learned to appreciate those who worked behind the scenes to keep them safe, including the remarkable dogs whose heroism saved lives that day. If this story moved you, make sure to like, share, and leave a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe to Acts of Kindness Stories. Help us reach 10,000 subscribers. We bring you inspiring real-life stories of courage, compassion, and the unexpected heroes in our world. Stay tuned for more stories that remind us of the power of human spirit and the bonds we share.